And what is up, everybody? I'm Joe DeHoyers. I'm the host of Beyond the Woodline, and I have with me tonight Jason McLean. Did I say it right? I didn't. I was asking
Yeah,
about that. Was it?
yeah, it's
Okay, good
perfectly
deal.
fine. Yeah.
And Tex, how are you guys doing today?
Good, man.
Yeah. Um, Tex, man, I really love your logo for Texas Front Porch, man. I really had to compliment you on that. It's pretty badass, really.
Well, I appreciate that, but and I'd love to take the credit for it. But that man right up there is the one that came up is the one that did it.
Really,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Dude, you did a good job on it, man. When I saw it, I was like, man, that's
Thank
a
you.
badass logo. It's badass. It really
I
is.
appreciate it.
Yeah, good
I just
deal.
love the fact that 3 years of being on StreamYard and Surly Santa still doesn't know he has to reverse the direction he's pointing.
Dude, I do that all the time. Like if I gotta
Mhm.
straighten out my shirt, I'm like, oh no, shit, what's the wrong side?
Yep.
I do that all the time.
I do that with my beard. My beard will sway one way and I'll grab it and I'll just take it the other way. And it's like,
Yeah, yeah, more in that
Mhm.
direction, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what hand am I using? Yeah. Now everything's reversed. Pandas aren't bears. Black uh killer whales are dolphins. Bananas are berries. Everything you know is a lie.
Yeah. Pandas aren't bears. Is that what you said? Pandas aren't
Yeah.
bears.
Although I think they've decided that they are bears, so koalas aren't bears. There you go.
Certain fruits aren't fruits; they're vegetables. Certain vegetables aren't vegetables; they're fruits.
Yeah. Well, technically, fruit isn't even a thing, really. It's a bit of a that's a culinary thing. But like bananas, they're berries. It's all berries.
Yeah.
They're all. It's like because technically, fruit is just like the meat around a seed. Like that's all it is. Like yeah, it's like we use culinary terms instead of scientific terms. Again, everything you know is a lie.
You got to do your research, people. That's what I tell everybody. Do your research.
Yep.
What's up, Mr. Robert? Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Well, cool, man. First of all, thanks a lot for doing the show, man. You guys were ready to go when I asked you, man. I appreciate that a lot more than you know.
Gosh. You know what? We're all in this together. Anything we can do to help, that's what it's all about, man.
That's right. Yeah, I'm gonna try to support as much people as I can, and try to help everybody out, So,
Hmm.
and I think that's what you should be doing instead of bickering and fighting. You know,
Oh
there's
yeah,
enough
no,
going. Yeah, there's enough
yeah,
going that in the world right now. We don't need it here in
exactly.
the paranormal community.
Oh yeah, no, the world's bad enough as it is. It doesn't need help, but it does seem like a lot of people like to thrive off of drama. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't get it either. It's like do you actually care about what we're trying to do here, or are you just here for are you just here to do the dance and get people to throw cash at you?
Yeah, that's what I always say. Everybody wants to wear the tiara.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There
It's
ain't
like
no doubt about that.
you're all pretty princesses, guys.
Yeah,
Let's actually focus on what we're trying to do here.
you're all number one. I'll put a gold star by you every time I see you.
There is a lot of super egos in this community.
Although
Yeah.
it makes me
Oh
feel
yeah.
good to know that it's all communities and not just our community.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This is just
Well,
a person problem.
YouTube as a whole, really. I mean, but and I understand you have to have a certain amount. You have to be at least a little bit egotistical to do this.
Right.
But I think, I mean, and I hate to admit that because
Wait.
I don't think I am, but
There's nothing wrong with having a healthy ego. I think we all have an ego. You got to keep it in check, though. I think.
yeah, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah, they let it control. They let it run wild.
Hmm. But we're all here. We're all good people, except for my surly companion here.
Yeah.
To talk about wonderful things like Bigfoot and the paranormal, and I understand that's what you do around here.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. That's what. First question, man. What got you, Jason, into the paranormal?
Oh, that's an interesting story. So the fastest version of this story is I've always been sort of into the paranormal. I have a biblical worldview, which means the paranormal is part of it. However, I did see and encounter a pterosaur in Texas, just outside of Dallas, when I was growing up, and And though I wouldn't have stated this publicly up until a few years ago, I didn't even understand how much it sort of directly affected me. I just sort of shoved it to the back of my mind. Even after I'd heard all the stories of living dinosaurs and even pterosaurs in Texas, I kept saying, that's deep South Texas. That's not Dallas Fort Worth, right? That's not the DFW region. And then long story short, which I'm failing at already, come to find out that there were accounts in southern Oklahoma. Took some time off, found a number of people who'd seen them here in North Texas as well. And the thing is, everyone said the same thing, right? They all thought they looked like cranes, which is what I thought I was seeing. Pelicans, sort of that large flying long-necked bird that that'll do that S-curve shape with the neck, right? So everyone sort of thought that they saw the same thing, and then they got a better look at it. And these are all daytime sightings except for one, and all within 20, 30 feet. In mine, at one point, the creature's wing was 5 feet from my face. So we all saw the same thing, and that sort of got me to be much more, once I sort of found these other people and started doing my own research on this, I was like, okay, I got to come out and start talking about this and becoming more public about it. So the rest is history.
So where were you at exactly when you saw that?
Yeah, See, that's one of those things you start doing the math. You're like, wait a minute. Yeah, I was growing up in DeSoto, Texas. It's a suburb of Dallas. I was in the 10 Mile Creek. I have two other witnesses. I have two witnesses for one event of one flying into the 10 Mile. That I have another witness who's personally known to me, who actually came to me after I wrote the freaking book, of course, right? And he's like, okay, I need you to tell me if anything shows up in the next couple of days. I'm like, okay, finally break him down. He was like just a mile from the creek, not even a mile from the creek. And so here in North Texas, I've got a bunch of accounts of living pterosaurs. I think they probably migrate sort of like sea turtles, right?
Okay.
I'm currently working from the theory that the reason we see them here is that this is a breeding point, right? They come, they lay their eggs, and then they leave, and then the juveniles hatch and they move on eventually. And that's when my thought is that's what we're seeing here in North Texas and southern Oklahoma. And then as they get bigger, we see them down around south, around the Rio Grande and other places. That's when they start getting bigger. But they stay here sort of closer where there's more trees. There's deep limestone creeks for them to sort of do their thing in and glide and grow larger. And then they grow large enough to leave. That's sort of the theory I'm working on for now. But yeah, no, living pterosaurs are a thing. It's just, they're not as popular as Sasquatch. So it's a lot easier to know when someone's telling the truth versus lying, because, with Sasquatch, people can watch if they watched a couple of seasons of Finding Bigfoot, they could fake an encounter.
Right.
But most people, no one's talking about living pterosaurs. So when you talk to them, if they give you certain details, you're like, you had to have seen one.
Right.
Because they're listing things that only people who've seen them would have noticed. So it's I'm trying to focus more on that. Because gas is just too freaking expensive. But something that we can, something that doesn't seem to be quite as smart as Sasquatch. Because I think at the end of the day, Sasquatch is too big, it's too intelligent. We're gonna have to we need way more resources, and we're gonna really have to rethink our approach, as well as definitionally, what is Sasquatch? We need to re-examine all of that, which is what we talk about on our show all the time. But with the living pterosaurs, even if they're kind of smart, they're still just reptiles, right? I think the reason they're not seen as often is they're mostly nocturnal, but B, when they are seen during the daylight, most people don't recognize them for what they are. They aren't freakishly big, the ones seen around here. They're not 20, 30 feet. They're 8 to 10 feet in wingspan, right? Big, but not overly big. They're gray or reddish brown. They fly like a crane. Like I said, that's what I thought I was like. It was just a giant blue heron. They have that. They do the S-curve thing with their neck. Their tail sticks out, so it looks like their legs are sticking out. They look like a heron. So I think most people they're driving to work or they're on their cell phones, they're just not seeing them. They're like, oh, it's a big heron.
Right.
And that's it. And it's over. And particularly in the morning, you have that more direct light coming from the side, or even just a little high in the sky. They tend to be more backlit. So you don't even see the differences. You're not taking that time to see them. So I think there's a really good explanation for them to be, aside from the fact that they have a critically endangered level population. I think we've got a number of really good reasons why they're not seen. And it's just lots of people aren't out there looking for them. They don't know to look for them. So
Yeah.
I think we got a better chance of finding those.
Yeah. They're probably seen as not recognized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about identification flipped?
Right. Yeah. Which I think happens a lot with all creatures.
Oh yeah.
Not just cryptids. I think people are out in the woods and they see something or hear something, and right away it's something else. And like I said, it doesn't have to be. It could be a deer, and someone thinks it's a moose.
Right. Well, again, armadillos. Yeah, armadillos. Like you go out in the woods, you think they're this giant monster crashing through the underbrush, and then you're like, this little thing just waddles out. It's like, howdy, and just keeps on going. You're like, what?
Right.
Yep.
Turkeys are the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Turkeys sound so large coming through the woods. So yeah.
Well, and I think too, everybody talks about, they saw a bear and they thought it was a squatch. Well, that goes both ways.
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's probably a lot more sightings than we think there are, but I mean, especially in bear country, they just write it off as a bear.
Right.
But
and what got you into the paranormal, Tex?
When I was 16, I had a dogman encounter.
Okay.
Yeah. I was coming back home from, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I was coming back home from hunting, walking down a gravel road. Sun was still up. It was working on going down. And he come out of the brush on my left, ran across the road about 30 feet in front of me, 25, 30 feet in front of me, jumped over the fence that bordered our place. I was just fixing to cross the fence and go home. And he dove over the fence, went down to all fours and disappeared. But, and it took me a while to get back in the woods but I did. And then I think I encountered him again. I think he bluff charged me, but, I kind of put it in the back of my mind, because you didn't want to tell anybody.
Right.
This was 1980 something. And, the term dog man hadn't even been coined yet.
Right.
All I knew to call it was a freaking werewolf.
Right.
But it stayed with me over the years, but I never really talked about it. Mm-hmm. And then just several years ago, and I got into Bigfoot and everything, and I didn't get into Bigfoot. I liked Bigfoot, since I was a kid, really, because I remember going to the theater and going to see The Legend of Boggy Creek. And I had family that lived up in Texarkana and owned land in Falk. And so we heard about that, and, it was always a cool thing, but never something you really thought about. We'd always, as kids, we'd always play about it, but that was it. But then several years ago, I got thinking about this kind of stuff and everything, and I look it on YouTube, and other people are seeing this critter that I saw, and they're actually talking about it. And I told my story on somebody's channel, ended up getting involved with them, and then it just kind of blew up, and I ended up doing my own thing. So, and I ended up going researching with somebody and had my first Bigfoot sighting, and then I started, hitting it, doing it solo, and over in Brown Springs, Oklahoma, and had just a lot of encounters.
Right.
Had another daylight sighting of a Bigfoot, and they got to where they'd come in close to the camp, and then I started running into all this other crap that I couldn't explain. And then I drugged
like meth heads.
Yeah, well,
Meth heads, yeah. Oh man, yeah. Don't even get me started on that. They are everywhere too.
but then I got hooked. I hooked up with Jason, and we kind of got the ball rolling on the channel. And then we brought in Rob and Bob and Randy, and we started going out there all together and started having some pretty good sized outings with a lot of other people, and started having all these freaking weird encounters
Right.
that we really didn't have any explanation for, and that's what we're trying to do now. Is we got what we have come to think. I won't say no because you know um, that all these different phenomena that everybody's running into out in the woods, they all get crammed into a, what do you call it, a Bigfoot box, isn't it, Jason?
Right.
Yeah, it's the Bigfoot. Yeah, I call it the
Yeah.
Bigfoot phenomena, but yeah, everything seems to get put into this one box, this paradigm, the Bigfoot paradigm. And the problem is, if you really stop and look at the phenomena in general, it's like, what do people actually see, right? Not what people claim is seen. What do eyewitnesses actually encounter? And you start noticing two things real fast. Once you get past the folklore, there are clearly physical Bigfoot being seen. They behave like apes. They are very pungent in their behavior. But then you have what is clearly supernatural entities running around.
Right.
They have supernatural abilities. They don't behave the way the physical Bigfoot behave. These are two entirely different things. In fact, there's at least two different phenomena going on, if not more.
Yeah.
But it is one of the things we've, again, like Brown Springs in general, it has been useful for really ramming home this idea that one of the questions we've asked, and we started on this a long time ago, and Brown Springs helped to seal this idea. But one of the questions that kept, I was playing devil's advocate one day on the show. We had nothing else to talk about. I'm like, let me play devil's advocate here, because in my misspent youth, I studied archaeology, and my professor, who was basically my minor, was actually a sort of he was taught by Grover Krantz himself.
Okay.
So he actually knew Grover Krantz personally. I heard all the stories first, basically firsthand.
Right.
And so I'm very aware of the arguments that are made for why we don't find Bigfoot remains. I use them as well. I've added a little bit more to them, to that lore as well, but because of the size, I think there's far fewer than we realize. But I'm still playing devil's advocate on this. I'm like, but let's get real hard and honest on this. And one of the things that in Tex's frustration, he asked, well, maybe Bigfoot is the distraction. And I realized, and I had to stop him on that one because I'll admit it once, he has a good idea every now and then. I mean, at least once or twice a quarter. But it's one of those. It's one of those.
A broken clock's right twice a day. So.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, at least a quarter. He's got to have at least a good idea. But to the more to the point here, it's that we started exploring the idea. It's like, well, hold on. What if a lot of these encounters are supernatural? What if they're not all Bigfoot? It's not this big thing of these Bigfoot over here are telepathic and interdimensional. It's like, well, whoa. What if we're just not dealing with Bigfoot here all the time? Tex, what does I say all the time? You see red glowing eyes in tall black figure
in your bedroom. It's a demon.
And it's a demon. You see it in the
forest.
In the
woods. It's Bigfoot.
Exactly. And that's and Brown Springs really helped to seal this idea that's like, hold up, there is a clearly paranormal, supernatural aspect to all of this. Now the question becomes, is it deliberately hiding as Bigfoot? Or are we misinterpreting it as Bigfoot? Because Tex, he's got several encounters that he swore up and down were Bigfoot until after we had one very hair-raising encounter. And I'm like, because I kept saying, like, Tex, this doesn't sound like a Bigfoot to me. It's too quiet. right? It's not leaving any material. Like, we should see tracks in the mud that it had to go through. We should have heard it crashing through the underbrush, and yet nothing. And so the question is, are we misinterpreting some of these paranormal things as Bigfoot, or are they hiding as Bigfoot?
And what he's talking about, the one encounter that comes to mind, well, there's two that I was convinced were Bigfoot for sure. And one was, I was sitting in camp. In fact, it was me and Randy.
Yeah.
And it was at night, and we were sitting in camp. And I saw something on the other side of the campfire come up out of the shadows, a humanoid figure. Looked like it walked up out of the shadows on the opposite side of the campfire, stood there for a second, and just walked right back into the shadows. And that's what he's talking about, where it was very, very muddy where that was. There was where that happened. There's no way that something didn't get away without leaving a print, making some kind of noise, something.
Yeah, it was covered in leaves, dried leaves. This was early fall. So it's like you couldn't walk anywhere without without just tearing up all these leaves. So, but he was like, no, it's got to be a Bigfoot. But then we have a particular encounter and where it just all hell breaks loose, literally.
Yeah.
Creatures are being seen by people that, they see the eye shine, they see the outline, they hit them with a tack light, thing disappears. Turn the tack light off, they reappear. He's going out with the girls from What the Paranormal. They've got their spirit box going haywire, talking and literally giving messages about their husband, which is back in the truck at the bottom of the hill. Headlamps are just electronics are just straight up malfunctioning, right? It's just all kinds of things start happening, and it's like, okay, this is too paranormal. Like, this is too much. And there have been, remote viewers review, who have seen the place who said this thing, there's an entity out there that is very old and very, very powerful. Tex has a photo of it. On it, they thought it was a 12-foot Bigfoot, 12-foot tall Sasquatch out there in the thing. But I'm more inclined to think it's a supernatural location. First time I was out there, I looked at the Brown Springs graveyard. I'm like, this is a former Indian mound, just straight up. I can see it. Like, it's if you know what to look for, they stick out immediately. I'm like, this is a burial mound, and of course it became a cemetery on top of it, and all kinds of hijinks. But the thing about burial mounds, particularly the older burial mounds, is they were particularly in Oklahoma. We've got a lot of stories of them being bulldozed in like the early 20s and finding giant skeletons in them, 8-10 feet tall. Buried in there. So it looks like these were the mound builders seem to have been Nephilim that came over from the Middle East. They came over here. They were escaping the Levant. And there are stories from South America of giants coming reed ships, right? When the Spanish came here, the American, the Plains Indians, they talked about giants being here as well. The Spanish, they talked about finding tribes that where the smallest person was 7 foot tall. So it does look like they came over here. They sort of inspired the mound building civilizations themselves, but they got buried there. So they tend to hang out in those locations. Their spirits are there, haunting as their locations of power. And it looks like it's entirely possible they were put there for, in some of these places for reasons. We found that Brown Springs is basically at the intersection of two ley lines.
Yep.
So it's a very supernatural place, but it's definitely pushed us to say the Bigfoot question is not being asked correctly. We're putting too many things in this box, and it's confusing everything, right? If I said, look, we're going to look for the Kigamajoo, right? This fabled thing. Joe, and you've seen the Kigamajoo, but it's a deer. And Tex has seen the Kigamajoo, and he's seeing a wolf, and you're calling them both the Kigamajoo. And we take what y'all have seen, nothing would make sense.
Right.
We'd never be able to figure it because we're looking for two radically different things. I think we see this with a lot of cryptids, right?
Yeah.
there's a name that gets associated with it, and everything gets put in that box, and so now we can't make hide nor hair of it.
We have the same problem, the same issue with Goatman.
Oh, hold on, I gotta do the bit.
Shameless plugs.
Shameless plug. So one of the things I discovered while writing Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demon, Fort Worth Goatman, and Other Terrors of the Trinity River, available wherever fine books and trashy rags are sold. And I think this whole idea that there are the Bigfoot phenomena is not what we think it is, or there's too many things being put into it, came while I was researching the book. Something I really was surprised to find out was as I was looking at all the different Goatman mythology, right? What am I going through puberty? Sorry, my voice is just cracking there. Going through the lore for all the Goatman legends in around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right? One of the things I was really shocked to discover was how they all said the same thing. It's like, well, the creature reportedly will throw trash and has been known to throw tires at people. And I'm like, but it's all this. It's exactly the same verbiage. And I'm like, wait a minute. This all sounds like the Fort Worth Goatman encounter.
Yep.
And it was. And so I'll sum up my findings, which was there are plenty of accounts of Bigfoot or Sasquatch being seen in the Dallas-Fort Worth area going back centuries. As long as people have been here, there have been sightings of these things. They call them the creature. They call them the monster. But the Fort Worth Goatman event, which was Jim Mars, he was the reporter. He's the one who called it a Goatman, or he's the one who popularized the term Goatman. That event was so powerful in the local Dallas-Fort Worth area that every Bigfoot sighting became the Goatman. Right. In fact, I've one of the things I didn't realize I had done until after I wrote the book. I actually extended the story of the Goatman later into the August of that year, because the Cedar Hill Historical Society recorded 2 encounters that were had in Cedar Hill, and allowed me to sort of trace how Goatman is moving. I was able to use the local lore to figure out how are the Sasquatch migrating from Fort Worth out to the Trinity River, maybe back out into East Texas. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I discovered was once everything became the Goatman, then what happened is that they took the story from that one encounter, and that lore got dropped on every paranormal bridge or Bigfoot sighting in the area. And then
because we're of the opinion that the Fort Worth Goatman was probably actually a Squatch.
Yeah. Right. But then everyone else's encounter becomes that. But then the name Goatman becomes powerful. It becomes its own thing. And so now you have the Goatman of Old Alton Bridge and Denton, but that's clearly all paranormal. Nobody, all of the actual sightings are of paranormal things. If I've got a sighting just half a mile down the road, maybe not even a full half a mile, of something that's not a Sasquatch.
Right.
We don't know what the heck it is. But in fact, it sort of falls under this whole idea of a rake. It was only like 5 feet tall, but it was this skinny humanoid with backwards facing legs, and things like that are seen all over Fort Worth, or all over Dallas-Fort Worth as well, even downtown Dallas, right? So it's like you start realizing, hold up, this lore is being placed and things are being overrun, and then you got the fact that White Rock Lake has actual Goatmen running around, like 7 foot tall humans, horns, goat legs, and they vanish in bright flashes of light in broad daylight. It's like, okay, these all can't be the same thing, right? So what's happened though is the name, call it Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Goatman, doesn't matter. The names become popularized, and then they get put into this box, and we're trying to make sense of all of it. We're trying to make all the lore make sense. And the problem is, this lore may be from some other event that's completely unrelated, right? And so the question then becomes, well, if that's the case, we got to take everything else out. We got to take it all out of the box, start from scratch. But then also start asking, okay, But what if some of this is deliberate?
Right.
What if Tex uses what you call it's the house in the woods theory,
The cabin in the woods theory.
cabin in the woods
You
theory.
know, and because we were talking about, because Jason's not real keen on the idea that our government could pull off a big conspiracy,
Right.
because they're just not smart enough to do it.
Mhm.
And you got too many moving parts, the whole 9 yards. So my question was, what if they're not the ones doing it? What if it's something behind the scenes, pulling the strings?
Right.
And when we talk about that big ancient entity, and not that just everything went off the hook. I mean, there was so much stuff going on at the same time in that one location in the cemetery that it became obvious to us that something very, very powerful is behind that, at least. So why couldn't it be behind a lot more?
Right.
The question we have is, one is why and what.
Right.
We get the Nephilim theory always enters into that.
Of course.
But I think it's the stuff that happens to people when they encounter these entities, these large humanoid entities with red glowing eyes. That's pretty much the standard description of what people are seeing. And one thing we're wrestling with is trying to get people to be open-minded enough, because you got everybody that's in the gorilla camp and you got everybody that's in the woo camp, is trying to get them to come together,
right,
and be open-minded enough to have the discussions and go, okay, well, just because I saw a dark figure with, glowing red eyes and it was 8 feet tall in the woods, doesn't mean it's a Bigfoot.
Right.
You need to take other things into account. And not only that, we're trying to at the behest of us. I mean, honestly, it's trying to get people to realize that just because you've been out in the woods for 20, 30 years doesn't mean, and you hear something that you've never heard before, doesn't mean it's a Sasquatch.
right.
It means it could possibly be an normal everyday animal that made a sound that you just haven't heard before. And I mean, there's a
That's probably Sasquatch.
That was a squatch.
Yeah.
Just the fact that I was out in the woods with 2 other people and heard this thing, and when we caught it on audio, we thought, hands down, we caught the greatest freaking audio since the Sierra sounds. Just blew us away when we heard it in real time. Then I got people to listen to it, and they said, nope, that's barred owls. And what it was not the normal everyday barred owl call that you hear. It was actually a mating pair of barred owls that another male had come in to try to squeeze his way into some 3-way action.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, it was basically a fight. And, but they go into this coyote sounding, owl sounding, monkey sounding chatter. And it covers the whole gambit. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what did we just hear? This is great. That's just an example,
Right.
A year ago, I had some a pack of coyotes living out in this field behind my house. It was the craziest time because I'm hearing sounds I've never heard coyotes make in my life. For a while, there was a time where I'm like, do we have a pack of hyenas out there? Like, I know they're coyotes, but there were times when they were sounding like a pack of hyenas.
Yep.
I mean, I would have sworn that's what I was hearing, but I knew I wasn't hearing it. So to Texas Point, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I've been out in the woods for 30 years. Great. Would you like me to run down a list of animals that you're supposed to have come across? Most people won't come across them. Tex and I, we've lived in North Texas most of our lives. I spent a few years out in East Texas, but I've never come across a coral snake.
Never have.
Right.
I've come across one gray fox, and that was like 5 years ago, crossing the road. Right? It's like these are things that are supposed to be normal. I've never seen a painted bunting in my life. I've got friends who've taken all kinds of pictures of painted buntings. I've never seen one.
Black squirrels.
Yeah, black squirrels.
Yeah, I've told people, I've seen a black squirrel. They look at me like I'm crazy, like I say something worse than Bigfoot. You know.
Well, you know, and the thing about it is, nowadays, I used to have them all over time. I used to play with them all the time. But you take somebody that's younger, that was, say, born in, like my kids, guarantee you they'd never seen a horny toad out in the wild.
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I used to play with them all the time. They were all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, there are people that still haven't seen lightning bugs. You know, I talk to people about that. They're like, I've never seen one. I'm like, you're my age and you've never seen a lightning bug, you know?
Yeah. That's... The lightning bug thing is actually okay. So the horny toad thing is because the fire ants they're killing them. They can't eat them. But the lightning bug thing is actually really disturbing because that's completely off topic. But they did a study of people's windshields over the last 20 years, and people are running across less bugs when they drive. And so there are a lot of ecologists that are worried that we may be facing some sort of ecological collapse because the insect population is actually dwindling from what it should be. And fireflies, lightning bugs, same thing. They're part of that math. The reason we're not seeing them is because bugs in general, their population is going down. So completely off topic. Sorry.
Except the mosquito and the tick population in Oklahoma, that seems to be thriving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they always do. But more, and here's another factor to throw in. Something I've really had in my head for a while. Even if you knew all the animals that are supposed to be out there, you know, every single call they could possibly make, like the back of your hand, great. We also have invasive species, right, that are moving in that aren't supposed to be there. You've got lost pets, right? Or someone brings in a tiger or kangaroos or whatever. Tex will explain why he's laughing here in a second. But here's another question I've got. What if the ranges of a lot of some of these other animals are greater than we realize? Right? Like, granted, yes, the majority of some of these migrating animals may be like this region here, but there's nothing that's going to keep some giant bull male elk from saying, you know what, maybe I want to go visit San Antonio.
Right.
I'm seriously like, what's to keep some of these other animals that's like, yeah, but it's like, well, we don't have them here. Well, what if they decide to go wandering? What if the bulk of them are going to come this far south, but some do? Well, great. Now you got an elk in northern Texas, right? Or in Oklahoma.
And everybody talks about, it's like Black Panthers.
Yeah.
They're here, but seeing one of them is just like seeing a Bigfoot,
Right.
But they're here. They're rare, but they're here. Take Brown Springs again. We didn't know we had bears in the area. And now the bears are coming back. They used to be in the area quite a bit, but now they're starting to come back, and we're seeing them down there.
Yeah, so, I've had friends find prints in the San Luis Forest, black bear.
There you go.
Yeah. So the point is, in this entire endeavor of Bigfooting, we've got a physical Bigfoot. Yes, absolutely. I'm convinced of that. I'm willing to be persuaded that it's all paranormal. On my more frustrated days, I'm 30 seconds away from throwing my hands up and saying it's all paranormal and just walking away and living the rest of my life.
Right.
But it's like, I'm convinced there's a physical Bigfoot, but we also have this paranormal aspect, and then we have the fact that everyone that we have all these researchers running around convinced they know everything about everything.
Yep.
And they're listening to things and they're like, well, this happened, therefore it had to be Bigfoot. You don't know that. You don't know what you're not familiar with every call that's in that area. You're not familiar with every call of every animal that could come into that area, right? And then don't even get me started on this thing. I have a whole spiel about these stupid phones and people taking photographs of them, right? They're like, well, I took these pictures on my cell phone, and look over here. If you squint and turn your head sideways and then smash your head into the table 3 times, you can clearly see it. Right?
Yeah.
Or
and then you're the butthole if you don't see it.
Exactly. You're the one who didn't. Yeah. And it's like, they're like, here, let me enlarge it as far as my Apple iPhone will enlarge by pinching and squeeze. And see, it's right there. There's clearly a face. Okay. The lens on this thing is good for selfies and good for really big photographs, like landscapes.
Right.
That's it. Everything outside of that, it is completely useless as a tool. We got to get people with real cameras, with real. Honestly, I think we need to get to film, and we need
35 millimeter.
35 millimeter, and we need to get actual lenses. I mean, a lens that will actually get this stuff done is like this freaking big. I mean, they're huge. I got friends who are they're shutterbugs. They spend a lot of cash on those things, and they give it again a photograph. I should be able to tell what I'm looking at. The reason I hate even more that when they're like, well, let me enlarge this by that when you pinch and enlarge, you're not actually enlarging the photograph. What it's doing, because there's only so many pixels there. It has an algorithm. It is looking for things. It is filling in the gaps. That's why when people are like, well, look, there's a picture there, or there's a face there. No, what you have is your pareidolia being triggered by the phone's pareidolia because it created this image through an algorithm that's designed to look for things. It's looking for faces too. It's looking for colors too. And it's trying to fill it in. It doesn't know what's there. Because the information isn't there. It is what you're looking at is a CGI'd blurry thing that kind of looks like a face because the iPhone thinks it might look like a face. And so your pareidolia is kicking in and saying, no, it's got to be a face, or it's got to be a hand, or it's got to be whatever. It's not a photograph. It's CGI.
Recognition. Yeah, that face recognition turned on. It's going to search for that.
And then
search for that pattern.
And then it doesn't help when you have the other guys pile on and say, yeah, I see it. And I see another one behind it. And there's a baby one. And there's something there with holding it in his hand. I'm like, oh, my God. Give me buddy.
Yeah, I took a picture and I've got 20 Bigfoot right there.
Yeah. I took a picture about 5 years ago. We were downtown. Well, we were by the medical center here in Houston. And they have like a little park set up, and like a little grove of trees. We're in the middle of the medical center here in Houston. Sorry. I took a picture of my daughter. She was maybe 10, 12 years old at that time. I took a picture of her, posted on Facebook, and people were telling me they saw Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth. I had to take it down. I just took it down. I'm like, oh my God. I posted a picture of my daughter and in the medical center, and y'all saw Bigfoot there.
Now, but don't get me wrong. Sometimes these people get lucky.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I don't think everything they catch is a Bigfoot.
Right. And, to kind of go back to your point that you were talking about earlier, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but, talking about there were other entities out there.
Yes.
I think that goes true when stuff is thrown at you or you hear footsteps. I don't think it's all. I think there's a lot more paranormal stuff that goes out in the woods than what people think. I've had people who have recorders, and we heard a voice. I mean, clear as day, just say nobody. Just that one word, nobody. He picked that up. And I had another friend of mine. He picked up a psst, on his recorder. So yeah, I think there's a lot of paranormal stuff that goes out in the woods, and people just don't realize it.
I've got audio on the channel that I'm at the base of the cemetery, and I'm getting out of the truck, getting my gear ready. I'm about to go up there, and I'm by myself. It's like, God, I don't know, 11:30, 3 o'clock. When I can't remember when I took this, but there's nobody for miles around, and I never heard anything until I started going up trail, and I heard stuff. But in that first 5 minutes that I'm just bumping around my truck, there's all kinds of growls picked up on my on the audio that I never heard till I played it back. I'm about 12 minutes it's about 12 minutes into the audio, but I'm about mid trail up top of the hill, and you clearly hear a female voice that sounds almost in my mic go, "Come on." You know, I mean, hell, I just dropped a video the other day. Jason and another guy that we researched with was in camp by themselves. The rest of us were, I think we were down at the cemetery, weren't we?
Yeah, that's the night that everything went haywire. Yeah.
We were down at the cemetery, which was a mile or so away.
Yeah.
And they're having a conversation, and you hear this whistle. Well, that's fine. Birds whistle. But this doesn't, it sounds like something or somebody is trying to imitate a whippoorwill, because it's an awful, awful imitation of a whippoorwill.
Yeah. It sounds like a person whistling to try and imitate it. That's exactly what it sounds like.
There's a second whistle, and it's a completely different call.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been down there. There was, golly, 10 of us in camp, and we heard the laughing. You know, the female laugh out on this side, and then a little later it was on this side of camp. You know, I mean, just all kinds of stuff.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. When we get off here, I'm going to send you an owl. There's my friend of mine got a recording of an owl, and then right after the owl, there's a woo, woo, woo. Yeah. It's creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this goes back to, and I'll take this question even further. Again, our basic premise is that there are physical Bigfoot out there, but there's this other stuff also, and it's all. The problem is everyone's calling everything that you see in the woods Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to figure out is what's the connection, is if there's a connection or not, and what's what. You know, how do we know? Like, what do we know? Is because we don't know what Sasquatch is, which means we don't know what it isn't, right? But here's a question, and it's something we need to ask is, okay, there are physical Bigfoot, there are paranormal things, supernatural things. Is it possible that these supernatural things are having an effect or controlling the physical Bigfoot? I mean, that's a question we got to ask.
Right.
I'm not saying that they are. I'm not saying that they're not.
Right.
But there are enough people who've had enough weird encounters that you got to ask that question. Is there an actual relationship there?
Well,
yeah, it doesn't mean there has to be, but it's a question we got to ask.
It's like we always say, you know, we're very open-minded, and we may not agree with what somebody says, but we're not going to, laugh them out of the chat room or laugh them off the stage. It's just not going to happen. Just because we haven't experienced something doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Just take mind speak, for example. Just because I've never had mind speak happen to me doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Right.
And I've said this, I don't know how many times I beat this dead horse all the time. I've got dear friends that I respect the hell out of that have had mind speak happen, that they claim to mind speak with these creatures. Okay. Right. My concern and Jason's too is that, the path that we're going down with the paranormal entities and everything like that, how can one be sure that it's Bigfoot talking to them, mind speak?
Right.
Because anything that can talk to you can lie to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's like, well, you talk to these people who claim to mind speak, and they're like, well, they told me that they were Bigfoot. Okay. And that means what? I'm sorry, but that I can claim to be Napoleon Bonaparte all I want. Doesn't mean I'm actually Napoleon Bonaparte.
You're not?
Now, obviously, no, I'm not. Obviously, Tex is Santa Claus. I mean, this is the worst disguise that he uses. I'm sorry. It's a terrible disguise. I tell him he needs to find a new one, but he won't. He's lazy. But that's the thing,
it's
right?
the Superman effect.
Yeah, there
The
you go.
Clark Kent effect.
There you go. It's the hat, really. So it really is like this whole. What we want to do is ask questions, but we don't just want to be asking questions to ask questions. It is to come to a conclusion. We do need to actually start being. We need to be more open, more honest with the questions, because the problem is everyone gets locked into their mindsets,
Right.
and their own little paradigms, and then there's no communication. Well, the problem is you're not getting all the facts, and this is really the part that's bothered us. It's like now that we've saying, hey, hold up, if some of these things are paranormal and it's the tall, dark, red glowing eyes, if we can't count those as Bigfoot, then how many Bigfoot sightings do we actually have?
Right.
Like, that's the question. It's like everyone's trying to figure this thing out. But our point is, but if the data is contaminated because you're looking for the wrong things, you're accepting the wrong things, because everyone had this idea there's only Bigfoot out there.
Right.
And a lot of people don't have a paranormal worldview. Again, this is why I talk about on my channel the biblical worldview all the time. It's like, if you only have a materialist worldview, then when something paranormal, supernatural occurs and has a physical effect on the world around you, you're going to assume it must then therefore be natural. Your worldview doesn't allow you to interpret that phenomena as anything other than material. And so you already have this big, tall, dark creature running around. Let's just say it's that one, right? And once you realize, no, the supernatural can have a physical effect, can materially manifest. I don't think the Nephilim can. Different story. But it's like, then you start realizing, well, hold on. We need to be a lot more exact about what a Bigfoot sighting actually is. To our point, unless there's fine detail seen, right, or it's a broad daylight encounter, it's not a Bigfoot sighting. If it's because how many times do we have video or audio or a photograph that matches what I'm about to say? I didn't know anything was there. I was just taking photographs, and look, there it is in the background. I was taking home videos, and here's this creature hanging out in this dark form, hanging out in the background. I was just recording my children singing the sound of music running through the hills of the Appalachian Mountains. And, oh, look, we now have this audio. We didn't hear it at the time. How often do we hear those stories? And they all get lumped in with Bigfoot.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm sorry, but if you put that inside of a house, immediately it becomes paranormal.
Yep.
Right.
The presence of walls does not make something physical or paranormal. And that's sort of the problem. Don't get me wrong. I'm certain that there are things hanging out in videos all the time. It's like they just didn't see it at the time. I'm groovy with that. But when it's right there, right? And no one sees or hears anything, and it's dark and it's fuzzy. It's like, maybe, again, the question here is we gotta be able to we've got to have a completely different conversation if we're going to decide, if we're going to be able to figure out what Sasquatch actually is, so we can know what it isn't, and then we can start asking what these other things are.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, have you guys seen the show on Prime? It's called Two-Face the Gray.
No.
It's on Amazon Prime. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's about a paranormal team who went out and they were doing, the paranormal research, and they caught this figure looking in a door and coming back. They were like, "Holy shit, we caught an apparition." And come to find out, they probably actually captured a gray on film, and that's what the general consensus is. That they actually got a gray on film. But there you go. They were in an abandoned building doing the paranormal research, and man, they were convinced they caught an apparition. When they went back and they were looking, doing all their, examining their evidence, going through all their footage, they saw it and they were like, "Holy shit, we caught an apparition," because that was what was in their mind. And the more and more people started watching, they were like, "No, man, you caught a freaking gray." And if you haven't seen it, man, it's really, 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 really good. I recommend it. But
All right. I'll give it a watch. That sounds interesting.
And what's it called again?
it's called Two Face the Gray.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's on
Two-Face
Prime.
the Gray. Write myself a little note here because I'm going to forget absolutely.
Well, you know, and going back with what Jason said, you know, the biblical view and everything like that. What I don't understand, and Jason knows I've been frustrated with this for a long time, is how someone with a biblical view of the world cannot have a paranormal view of the world.
Yes, they were.
You know, and speaking of Australians, there's some the Yowie hunters. If you haven't seen that video, yeah, that thermal. I mean that's pretty good stuff, man. I mean, I got no explanation for it. You know, if it was hoaxed, I don't know how they did it,
right?
Because you know somebody in a suit's going to give off a different heat, signature.
Right.
Well, it would have to be somebody. I don't know. I have no idea how they would do it, but
yeah, the video is interesting.
We're coming up at the end of the show. I just want to ask you guys if you have anything you want to say to the people out there who might want to do some research, whether it's Bigfoot, paranormal, or whatever they want to do.
Don't do it alone, and be careful. And do your research. You do your armchair research before you do your boots on the ground research.
Yes. Yeah, I'm with them. Just do it safely. Again, that means don't do it alone. Texaria. Don't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, right? Do the armchair research first. Find out, find the area that you want to research in. And I think the other thing we have to do is, again, better cameras, right? Cell phones aren't going to cut it. And we got to spend time out there. In fact, my general opinion on all this is we're not going to find any physical. We're not going to get the evidence we need by running around the woods, going here, Bigfoot. I don't think we're going to get that. It's going to be at places where they come to us, right? In fact, I'm very public about what I'm looking for. I'm still looking for a place in an active area, but I'm looking for a roadside diner. Or a gas station that serves food and throws food away, right? Near a creek that's near an active area that's sort of butted up against that wood line a little bit, because we know they'll dumpster dive.
Yep.
Right.
So what we need is better cameras on that, trained to on that dumpster to see them come in. We definitely need. We need more money and resources than we currently have, but to a point, do it safely. Don't be foolish. Don't go running around half cocked.
I got two pieces of advice. If you're going to go out in the woods, carry water. Number two, get a compass and learn how to read it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Just be safe. I mean, it's, take some classes at a Y or something, or look up, survival techniques. If you want to go into the woods, that's perfectly fine, but do it safely. And that means, particularly if you're in Texas, be armed for those freaking boars.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but those feral hogs will kill you deader than anything. Right. So just, again, stop. Don't be stupid. Water, preparedness, you're still out in the woods. Even if you're in a state park, any number of things can happen. You can fall. You can, you can take a wrong turn and
you get lost. Yeah, I've gotten lost.
Yeah. I've been left in the middle of the woods before. Not by this guy. It's one of those things where just be, again, do your academic research, be prepared, and do it safely.
And if you want to go to an area, if you want to do it and you haven't done it, hit up somebody that knows the area. That does the research. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to go look at Brown Springs, hit us up. We don't charge anything, you know. I mean, it's like, you want to go with us, we'll be more than happy to take you. You know,
Yeah, it's a public park. Like
yeah,
I mean, it's like, you know, people are like, you know, I love that. Don't get me wrong, Brown Springs has its history and it's well deserved.
yeah,
We're learning, we've learned very recently, even more so than we originally thought. But it's still just, it's a public park. I mean, you can just drive up and park there, and
yep,
anything you want to see is going to come to you. I mean, it's sort of
Hmm.
like I said, to my point, I'm kind of done with it a little bit, because now we need to figure out what's the separation between the physical and the paranormal. But if you want an encounter, just drive over there. Just park it. Like literally they have these little gravel roads, these little turnarounds. Just go camp there for a day or so. Something will happen, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not
Right.
going to guarantee there won't be meth heads or
Yeah,
witches.
There unfortunately there's a lot of that activity there.
Yeah. So, which is another reason why we're kind of straying away, particularly the occult. There's a lot of occult behavior over there,
Mhm.
and we're getting some. We now have reason. I can't be specific yet, but there's reason to believe it is more violent than we realized.
Yeah.
Right. Why don't you guys plug your shows in, or you can plug your book again, Jason?
Tex, I'll let you go first.
We do Texas Front Porch, man. Come over and see us. We got 4 shows now. As soon as we get Bob up and running, we've got Texas Front Porch Mondays at 6:30 p.m. We've got we're gonna have Van Buren Variety simulcast on ours on Tuesdays at 7. Wednesdays at 9 o'clock. We're gonna have Jason McLean Questions Everything. It's premiering tomorrow night.
Yes.
Thursday afternoons at noon Central, you've got Big Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob. So, yeah. And I mean, we've got, we put our evidence on there, but we don't claim it's a Bigfoot. We don't, everything that we put up there is a question mark, because, I mean, unless it walks up and gives me a kiss, I'm not going to put it on, hey, this is a Bigfoot.
Yeah. I apologize for doing that last time, by the way. Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons. Yeah, you have Metroplex Monsters, Dallas Demons, Fort Worth Goatman, and other tiers of the Trinity River. Or you can just go to serupapers.com. It has links to Texas Front Porch, my Bible study. It has links to all of my books, and to my Seru Papers YouTube channel, where we talk about cryptozoology, ufology, forbidden archaeology, and prophecy, all from a biblical worldview.
Cool beans, fellas. I really appreciate you guys doing the show, man. Did a great job. We gotta do this again too, man. We could probably talk another 2 hours. I really like that. Guys in the chat room, man, thanks a lot for participating. I really appreciate it. And you guys have anything else you want to add or say before we say goodnight?
No, just thank you for having us on, man. It's a lot of fun.
And I'd love to do it again anytime.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah, I love it too. And with that being said, everybody, y'all have a good night and enjoy the rest of your evening. And you two guys, hold on real quick. I want to show you something.
Sure.
And that sounded kind of weird, but anyway. All right.
Not the first time it's happened. So
yeah. That's for the paid channel. But
yeah,
all right, guys. Y'all have a good night.